Hello, fifth grade. All right, so today we're going to wrap up talking about the readings in chapter 6 and really talk about how does England really get their stronghold into the North America and really start pushing their way by being a power to be reckoned with and really pushing the indigenous populations away. So the King Philip War is really one of the parts in history after Plymouth happened. There's this time of about 20 so years where there's just constantly more settlers coming from England to settle into the New England areas. We're talking about that upper area of the United States, kind of like where like New York, Massachusetts, Connecticut, Rhode Island, kind of like that little section right there where they settled Plymouth. And how do what happens when more people start coming? Well, when more people start coming, they're going to be pushing their way inland. And as they're pushing their way inland, that's going to be causing more conflicts with the native populations. So we're going to go through, and if you open up your packet to page 5 of your packet, there's this chart that we're going to go through. We're going to talk about the cause and effects of this war. I think it's really important to kind of see like what happened, what did the indigenous populations do that then brought an effect on from the England, or what did the English do that then brought retaliation from the local native tribes, and what did they do to retaliate against the English, and how did war break out? And of course, the biggest effect that happens from this and leads to the 13 colonies really getting a push to being formed. All right, so the King Philip decides on war. American Indians and English settlers had a complex relationship. At times they worked together, but at other times they fought bitterly. As more English settlers arrived, they took lands on which American Indians lived. In 1675, one chief went to war to stop this. How did the English colonies in New England face this challenge? Wampanoag relations with the English settlers were badly strained in 1675. However, it had not always been so. For many years, the Wampanoags had watched as settlers from England moved into their homeland. They not only had tolerated the newcomers, but had also assisted them. In fact, the settlement at Plymouth might not have survived without the Wampanoag help. In 1621, Massasoit had peace agreements with leaders of Plymouth colony. His son, Metacom, had even taken an English name of Philip. When Philip, which is Metacom, became the Wampanoag leader, he hoped to work with the settlers to protect and provide for his people. He also wanted to prevent further English settlements and to organize the local tribes. But there had been trouble. In 1662, King Philip's brother had died suddenly. King Philip believed that the English had killed him. Although the Wampanoags continued to work with the English, King Philip's trust was shaken. So King Philip is Metacom, which is Massasoit's son. So the original chief of the Wampanoag's son, Metacom, he changed his name to Philip to be more English, and to try to work with the English. But when he becomes the leader, he's considered King Philip. So King Philip is not a king in England. Just to make sure you guys don't get confused on that. All right. Just a few weeks before the eclipse, the English had put 3 Wampanoag men to death after finding them guilty of murder. King Philip believed that their trial under English laws had been unfair and that the men were innocent. An angry group of Wampanoag warriors struck back, killing 9 English settlers in a village called Swansea. King Philip and his people now faced a choice. They could either seek peace with the English or go to war against them. King Philip made a faithful choice. Even though they knew that much bloodshed would follow, they decided to fight the English. The war he began changed the lives of thousands of people across New England. The battles to come were among the deadliest in American history. Now, King Philip's war was a complex struggle. It was not just a war between the English settlers and the Wampanoags, because New England was home to many American Indian groups. Tribes such as the Nipmucs, the Narragansetts, the Mohegans, and others faced a hard choice. As one Englishman noted, many of the Indians were in a kind of maze, not knowing well what to do. Some would join King Philip while others would side with the settlers. Why were American Indians undecided? Many groups shared King Philip's anger at the English, but others had friendly ties with settlers. Some had converted to Christianity, and many American Indians had fought side by side with English soldiers before. In the Puget War of 1636, some tribes had even joined the English to defeat the Puget tribe, showing the New England American Indians were not always friendly with each other. In 1675, deep rivalries still divided many groups, and certain tribes would settle old scores by joining the English. The English settlers were more united than the American Indians. When war broke out, they soon organized to meet King Philip's challenge. Yet, as the American Indians' old rivalries and conflicts caused troubles, communities blamed each other for causing the war, arguing over who led and supplied troops. Some feared that the war would be an excuse for a rival settlement to take disputed land. Such disagreements harmed English defenses. So it's a lot of back and forth, right? This tribe agreeing with each other, or this tribe agreeing with the English, or the English trying to keep their friendly ties with other English groups or other native groups. All along, they're trying to figure out who's starting this war, who's going to be supplying all this group, who's going to have the first attack, who's attacking him. So that part gets a little bit confusing. At first, the American natives had success. They surprised the English by making hit-and-run raids, which involved sneaking up on a target, launching a surprise attack, and then disappearing. The English had trouble adjusting to this type of warfare because they were used to fighting in the open. King Philip's forces made great gains. Now that victory seemed possible, new allies joined him. Once friendly tribes turned against the English, causing the English to suspect even loyal American Indians. In one town, officials imprisoned a large group of Christian American Indians on an island in Boston Harbor, and elsewhere officials tried to take the weapons away from American Indians. English commanders refused to use American Indian soldiers in battle. Such treatment turned former friends into enemies. In the fall of 1675, the English were worried because the mighty Narragansett tribes had not yet joined the war. The English feared that the tribe might join King Philip. To stop them, the English attacked a large Narragansett settlement. The Great Swamp Fight left many hundreds of Narragansett men, women, and children dead. Many English fighters were also killed or wounded. Although the Great Swamp Fight was a terrible blow to the Narragansett, it did not stop the American Indian onslaught. Warriors still raided terrified English settlements. In the winter of 1676, villages just 10 miles away from Boston came under attack. As spring approached, the English were on the verge of defeat as many of the villages lay in ashes. Luckily for them, their fortunes were about to change. The English did not know that King Philip was in trouble too. After the Narragansett's defeat in the Great Swamp Fight, Philip needed more help. He took a large force to present-day New York, where he hoped to win support of the fierce Mohawk tribe. But instead, the Mohawks attacked him. His forces limped back to New England. At this time, the English made a key decision. They again made use of friendly American Indian soldiers, such as the Christians who had been held on the islands. So, it's kind of twisted. The American Indian soldiers who were Christian, who they had locked up because they were afraid they were going to attack the English or turn against them, they now unlocked them up and said, hey, we trust you now. Come fight with us. It's kind of a weird, I'm going to lock you up, but now I'm not going to lock you up. The decision paid off. Within months, the combined English and American Indian troops were winning the war. King Philip's forces were now on the run. The end came to King Philip in August 1676. He was shot by an American Indian soldier who had joined the English. By summer's end, King Philip's war was over. King Philip's war took little more than a year, yet its effects were long-lasting. Dozen settlements had been destroyed, and about 600 English settlers in the region, out of a total of about 52,000, had died. The damage to the American Indian population was even worse. Go figure, right? Some experts think that many as 3,000 out of a total of 20,000 American Indians in New England died. Many more were captured and sold as slaves. When the war was over, New England was in ruins, but completely under English control, which is the biggest thing here. Even though American Indians had played a big part in the survival for the first English settlement, with many helping the English win King Philip's War, American Indians were largely gone from the region by 1676. Just a few tribal communities remained after the devastating conflict. The English, on the other hand, would recover. Their settlements would once again grow and prosper. And there's a painting of King Philip or Metacom, who then took the name of King Philip. And so this kind of just shows you the area they're talking about. Now, the reason this is important is because these become large cities in New England that then become larger colonies. And these settlements, they were in ruins, they burned down, but they built up. But the part here is that all the tribes that lived here are now completely pushed out, or they are completely eradicated. And that's how English gets a stronghold. And from that, the English continue to push native groups out of the coastal areas of where the 13 colonies are and continue to push inland. And other paintings or representations of what it looks like, kind of showing how the natives were fighting more through the forest, and it was difficult for the English who were used to fighting out in the open and regular battlefields. And I think this is a landmark, if I'm not mistaken, somewhere in Massachusetts, where they actually have monuments made for those who sacrificed during the war. But I think it's just one of those things that's really important to pay attention. That how does the 13 colonies prosper? They prosper through, after the King Philip War, by their strength of being able to eradicate Native American populations out of this area. 3,000 out of 20,000 groups of American natives. And that's not even thinking of, them being pushed out or pushed over into other tribes. And so this idea of how does England get their stronghold comes from the King Philip War being a big turning point in that. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go through and go back through some main events. All right, so it says read each numbered sentence in the cause column of the chart, then find information in the read and do King Philip decides on war to help answer the question in the second column. Write the answer in the effect. All right, so it's cause and effect, right? Something happened, and then what was the result of it? So King Philip's brother died, and then how did King Philip feel about the English? Explain. So let's scroll back to the beginning of the reading will help. And actually, just for a little history's piece, I think it's important to kind of know, how does all these people play a part? Who are we talking about? So Massasoit was the chief of the Wampanoags. His son, Metacom, changes his name to Philip. And then he becomes King Philip. When Massasoit passes. All right, so just kind of, I think it's kind of nice just to know how, I think sometimes when I first learned about this, King Philip, I'm like, wait, this isn't English? Where are we talking about the natives then? But just to know that Metacom took an English name. All right, so King Philip's brother died. All right, so in 1662, King Philip's brother had died suddenly. King Philip, how did he feel about the English? Well, King Philip believed that the English had killed his brother, and he lost trust in the English. Next, the English put 2 Wampanoags to death after finding them guilty of murder. How do the Wampanoags react? What does this lead to? All right, so a few weeks before the eclipse, the English had put 3 Wampanoag men to death after finding them guilty of murder. King Philip believed that this trial under English law had been unfair and that the men were innocent. An angry group of Wampanoag warriors struck back, killing 9 English settlers in a village called Swansea. So what did this lead to? So the Wampanoag struck back by attacking a village, killing 9 English settlers, and King Philip now decides to go to war against them. English forces feared that the Narragansett tribe would join King Philip's war against the English. What did the English do to prevent this? So, English forces feared that Narragansett tribe would join King Philip's war against the English. What did the English do to prevent this? I have to scroll a little bit. All right, so in the fall, the English were worried because the mighty Narragansett tribe had not yet joined the war. The English feared the tribe might join King Philip. To stop them, the English attacked the large Narragansett settlement, and that was called the Great Swamp Fight. So this little sentence through paragraph right here. King Philip asked the Mohawks for help. What did the Mohawks do? So he had hoped to win support of the fierce Mohawk tribe, but instead the Mohawks attacked King Philip and his forces were retreated back to New England. How did this affect King Philip's forces? So King Philip's forces were on the run because they were outnumbered by the English and the American Indian troops that were joined with them. The English thought they were losing the war. What did the English do to increase their forces? How did this change the war's outcomes? So they made use of their friendly American Indian soldiers and added to their troops in order to combine them in order to win the war. About 1 in 20 English settlers and about 4 in 10 American Indians died. After the war, who had lost power, who had gained power in New England? So at the end of the war, American Indians had played a big part. Many American Indians died, but the English now controlled the majority of the land and settlements. So natives lost land, tribes dwindled, and the English took over the region. So when we look back at the map from chapter 5, just give me 1 second, I'm going to pull it up. So when we look at what did the world look like in the 1750, like this time after all these wars, you look at we talk about the British Empire at the beginning of this chapter, and we talk about imperialism, right? Taking over land, building your reign by having settlements in different countries. And we look at this part of the world. Now, Europe was its own civilization. Each country developed into its own, but Europe is small compared to the other continents on the world, and their natural resources were scarce, right? They didn't have the things that they needed in order to produce the supplies they needed, so they needed to find supplies elsewhere. So by building these colonies around the world, they were able to extract the natural resources and build their kingdoms and countries more so, while creating these settlements in the New World in North America, South America, specifically the 13 colonies. But we have to think, use the King Philip War as an example. This is just one small example. When you were talking with your Explorer report, right? What were some of the things your Explorer had to do in order to conquer the land and claim the land for a country? It wasn't just free open land, right? We have to remember there were indigenous populations that sacrificed more so than those that fought in the European settlers and soldiers that fought. So we look at this map and we look at what happens from the King Philip War, right? The King Philip War was just talking about this tiny little area up in here. Actually, that's Norman's Run, kind of like right around here. So, we're just talking about one small area, one small little war, but we have to keep in mind that there were indigenous populations living all over North America when we talk about our Native Americans. And so, the issue of the King Philip War didn't just happen. It wasn't just one small thing, right? We can just imagine there were similar wars and similar conflicts that occurred as more English and other Europeans came into the English colonies and started to settle, started to build the settlements, and starting to push their way up through. This is the Appalachians. Remember, chapter 1, we talk about the U.S. geography, and the Appalachians. So we kind of get to this point where the 13 colonies move towards through to this called the Ohio River Valley, and where the Appalachians are. They kind of stay here up until after the American Revolution.